So I've got pretty much everything laid out that you're going to need and possibly need to do this job. We've got some 1/16 drill bits that are going to help us start that. We've got what's called spot weld removers. I'm going to put a link down in the description, so hopefully you guys can find this stuff on the old Amazon. That's fairly cheap. You may need a grinder. It's not going to be 100% necessary to have a grinder, but you're at the very least going to need a cutoff wheel and some kind of brush. We're also going to get a scraper. Now, I personally get this scraper from Ace, as you can tell, and I'm not an Ace spokesman or nothing, but this actually works really well for removing the glue down here, which we're going to have to remove to expose the spot welds so we can drill them out, and then we'll take the wire wheel and we'll clean that off. We're also going to need our replacement part. Now, you can get this from Ford and you can get this from Dorman. I really don't see a difference. You can look in my playlist on the different ways that you can actually do this job. It's called Shock Tower, Rusted Out Shock Tower, and it's on my channel. We're going to need some undercoating, some black primer, and the only thing that I don't have here right now is possibly spray foam. The spray foam will go down inside here, and we would make brackets if this is rusted out right here. You cannot add the spray foam before you weld. Now, you can get a welder, rent one for about $50 a day. That'll include your wire, so that's not bad. But there is two other alternatives to welding this in here, and they are also in that Rusted Out Shock Tower playlist on my YouTube channel here, and you can watch for them. Now, the very last thing that you may need in this situation is going to be a lighter. Now, you say a lighter. Well, if this becomes a real pain in the ass, you can burn this sucker down. Okay, so this vehicle came to me disassembled pretty much like you're seeing it. There's a plastic piece that you pull up right here, and then this just removes this side panel here. There's only one thing that you need to know about the side panel. The only thing kind of tricky about removing this is there's a little pushy down here on the front of it near that seat right there. You pull that up with some pliers and you'll get it out of there. If you can't manage to get this plastic off, you're not going to be able to manage to do this job anyways. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove this panel here. In some situations, it could be a tire there. It could be a plastic piece there. They're bolted along the outside edge. Super simple stuff. We're going to focus primarily on the removal and the replacement of this. We're going to go now and remove this cardboard portion and that seat right there to do this side. If you were doing this side, the procedure is going to be identical. It's just going to be opposite, and we would remove that seat there. If you have a panel like this one, it's held down by 3 15mm bolts. Okay, here in the back, this should already be removed. We're going to go ahead and pull on this, raise our seat forward, then fold our back seat down. Now with our seat folded forward, we're going to remove the 15mm nuts that are holding down this bracket and this 15mm bolt here. With the 4 removed, we should be able to move the seat up out of our way, and we're going to remove the bolt that is securing down this seat belt strap and the bolts that are securing down this bracket and the bolt that secures that down. I want to point out, if you have the additional subwoofer that's back here, it's held on by, if I remember correctly, 3 or 4 10mm bolts and nuts. It's very simple to remove and you'll unplug it. I'm also going to remove the rear tail light, even though it's not 100% necessary. You can work around it, but there's been times in the past where I was trying to work around the wire and the wire got caught up on the grinder and tore it, etc., etc. So I just found it easier to take out the 2 Phillips screws that hold the tail light housing on, unplug the tail light bulbs, and get the wire right out of my way. Also, in some situations, you'll find that there's a ground that comes right here. Don't forget to hook that back up when you're done. Now I take the Torx T50 bolts out of here and here. The only reason that I remove both of them is so I don't have this thing hanging in my way the whole time. You could just throw it outside the car and clamp it to here or something, but it does make it easier when it's not in your way. These bolts are 10mm bolts that hold that bracket on, and the only reason I take that out is because it extends out and it'll hit up against the new panel when I'm trying to place it in there, because you do take the panel out once or twice, put it in there, make sure it fits, and if you need to repair the floor like I do, you'll need to get it in and out a couple times to be able to make sure you got your floor right. Now we'll go ahead and remove the jack. Okay, so one of the improvements I've made to the procedure is I remove the 19mm lug nut sockets that are on here. I place a jack stand, usually underneath here if I was working on it in the driveway, and I grind this lip down right here, and I'll remove this plastic piece right here. That allows me to get to this side of the spot rivets, and the panel actually sits over here. So the only work that we have to do on the inside is possibly remove the glue that's on the opposite side of here and do the spot welds up there, which are much easier to get to. But drilling out the spot welds from this area on the outside in the wheel well allows you not to drill all the way through both panels, but also allows you to take the panel off this way and makes it easier for welding. Now from the inside, we're going to unplug the wheel speed sensor, and we're going to push it through to the other side and pull it out from the fender. Now we're going to use our wire wheel on our drill, and we're going to take off this area up here, and we can also see the rust that's coming through between this gap. If we've got a rust hole like this right here, that we're sure of that we're going to need some spray foam. But we're going to take the area back right here, just so when we go to put our glue down and through here, it sticks to metal and not to rust. And we're also going to take off this edge right here, and we can kind of see how far up we need to go, and I'll show you the exposed welds once we get that done. Okay, so there's a total of 4 or 5 screws that hold this inner fender shroud on, and once that's removed, we can start getting our shock out of the way and then start grinding on our lip right here. Okay, these shock bolts can be finicky. There's supposed to be a bar on here that holds it, but I'm going to be honest with you, it doesn't hold it very well, so I have to heat up the nut to be able to remove it. And I use this style of vice grips to be able to loosen this nut. So I'm going to heat it up, and with the 24mm socket, I'm going to take it off. As you're grinding down on this, you can start to get an idea of where your spot welds are by the different depths. I did find that the grinding wheel was much better to use than the wiring wheel. So now at this point, we're going to take our punch and we're going to center punch this, and then we're going to take our little drill bit and we're going to drill into it. That's about what it should look like after you use your center punch. Now when I stick my drill bit in there, I don't let too much of it stick out, because you don't want to push down on it and have it break. I won't push very hard, and I'll let the drill do the work to go into the metal, applying just a gentle amount of pressure, going the right direction. Let it drill into there, and all we're really trying to do is make a pilot for the needle of the spot weld remover. Now we only need to drill through the first sheet of metal. We don't have to drill all the way through. There's actually 3 pieces in this spot. Now only about 20 or 30, maybe 40 more of these, and we're all done. LOL. I literally said LOL like I was typing. Okay, if you press that hard enough with your punch, you may not have to make a pilot. But I'll tell you from experience, it generally makes it easier to make a pilot hole, because it will jump off center like it just did on me. As you go along from working from the outside edge right here, and you use a screwdriver to pull that up, you're going to be able to notice as you remove the spot welds, because sometimes there'll be spot welds in here and you might not be able to see them as easily See, like, I think there should be a spot weld right about here, but I'm not certain right now. But as I go along with my screwdriver, I will be more certain. Don't worry too much if you drill all the way through. It's not a big deal. We're just trying to take off this outside layer of metal. As I drill in there, I move this like this. It makes a lot less effort and makes it easier to drill into the metal and get through the first layer. Now that we think that we've got that edge released, we can inspect this edge and get whatever we can that's easily gotten to from this angle. Get that off, and then we'll move on the inside. Now on the inside, we're going to take our punch and punch all of our spot welds, then drill them, and then drill them out with the spot weld remover. Okay, now we need to start removing the glue that's underneath here because there's spot welds underneath this glue and we need to be able to remove them. We're going to go to about right here and we're going to remove it down. Now I'm going to show you a little procedure, and that's going to actually make it a lot easier for you to remove this glue. First, we're going to start from going up here. We're going to go about halfway down. Then we're going to start from then we're going to go from right here on the floor because the glue is back to about this area right here. And then we'll go in from right here and move down this line. What that does is allows you to get the glue off without going between the two pieces of metal, because if you're hammering down on this, you're going to drive this in between there and it's going to bend things up and bollocks it up. So that's why you only go about halfway down, halfway in, and then run it down this way, and you pretty much do the same thing. But on this area, it's actually a little bit easier because you can go along the floor like this and then go like this and come in on an angle and get all that glue off. We need to get that glue off because when we go to weld, we don't want that heating up, and we need to glue over the top of this to seal this seam. So that's the procedure that we're going to use, and I'll demonstrate it to you. Then we'll have our panel almost out once we remove the rest of the slot welds and make sure that they're all separated from everything with your screwdriver or whatever. And hopefully this sucker comes out pretty soon. A little bit, and that's really not what I want. And you can hear the noise change when you're going into metal. So I've just taken my chisel and I've put it behind the glue right there. I'm going to try to tap it down and just run it along that edge right here so I can remove it. Okay, when working on this corner, don't worry about getting any further than this, because if we can find a spot weld right here, we'll probably get it. But down here, it's hard to get your drill in there, and then you got to drill through two different pieces of metal to get into your outside framework of your wheel well. So we just go down about that far, and then we end up cutting this off and cutting the new one to fit down in this channel. So when you get the bulk of the material off of here, now we can take the wire wheel and we can clean this up so we can see the spot welds. We go back to about here because there's actually one piece of metal on the other side of this piece of metal, and then there's the one out here, which is our edge, and the panel fits in between the two, just in this area right here. So now that you've got it down to where you can see the spot welds, we can start drilling them out and get these couple out of here. And then we'll go over to there and do the same thing. Okay, with all the spot welds out of there, and it's rusted up, so we can start pulling it out. I have one more little spot weld right here that I got to get out, and we'll be good to go. Now, in a perfect world, we would take this out of here, and this portion would slip down inside there when we went to put the new panel in. But it's nearly impossible to get a drill down here and grind out the spot welds, which there's one right here, and it's just not theoretically easy. So what we'll do is we'll just cut the end of our new panel right here off and butt it up against here. This will be secure enough for it. Now we want to take off any of this loose material that's for the undercoating off of here with a hammer and the chisel, and then we want to take a grinder and we want to grind all this smooth and to bare metal if at all possible. Doing the same thing on the inside of this lip right here. We want to grind it down so we have a nice place to weld to. We're going to weld out here on the bottom and put the glue in on the top. Up here we're going to weld it in from the inside. With your wire wheel, take off as much rust as you possibly can to show bare metal. Now I'm going to rough fit my my panel. And the reason I say rough fit, because I don't want to go all the way to the back and turn on my air compressor to cut the front of that off. But I want to make marks to where I know that I need to drill so I can drill through the panel, which you'll see here in a second, so I can make my welds. This area I don't need to drill in because I'm actually just going to use the holes that I got here and weld to the panel, but I need to grind this off so my welds will stick. And right here on the inside I need to grind and drill holes so my welds will stick. Same thing all along this edge. I need to grind it down so the two metals will stick together. Now I'm going to grind this area right here, so when I go to weld to it, the weld will actually stick to this panel. This area right here, I'm just going to drill and I'm going to grind the edge of it, because sometimes I'll weld right here and I'll put little spot welds inside little holes that I drill inside here to affix it to that panel right there. Then from where I made this mark on this edge right here on the opposite side, I'll grind it and drill holes to be able to plug weld to there. Now I've got my area fairly ground down the way I wanted it, so I can weld back to it. Okay, now I've got the surfaces ground down. I didn't really need to grind here. I was supposed to grind on the inside of there on this front side. So now we'll flip it over and we'll do the other side. Now I've got the other side ground down about the way that I want it. So I'm going to start drilling my holes now. Okay, so I'm going to use a 1/8 drill bit, and it doesn't really matter where you put the holes at. You just want to put them down here, probably about a 1/4 of an inch up from the edge. And we're going to keep in mind that when we go to put this in, not only are we going to tack weld it, so we want it to be, you know, pretty close to the edge, and you'll see when I'm done, but we're also going to weld the edge of this because our metal behind this plate is a little bit weaker, and as we go up, it's a little bit stronger, so it should weld to that. Okay, so we've drilled everything out. I've probably got more holes than I actually need, but we're going to put the panel in there. I took and knocked out the rust right here, which where this leg was rusted at up there in that corner. I took it, knocked it out. But if yours is not rusty like mine and you can't get the spot welds out, you just take and cut out this notch right here. Not a big deal. So now we've got it fit down inside there, and everything is on the inside that's on the inside, and we got a pretty big gaping hole that we're gonna have to fill right there. Now we'll take clamps and we'll clamp this down and start to weld in our panel. It'll come together once we clamp it down and push it up against the metal. Okay, I want the metal as close to the other metal as possible, so I've got it clamped down. You guys aren't going to see a ton of my welding because I'm a terrible welder, and if you're not a good welder, don't worry about it. It's pretty simple. You're just going to start plugging in these holes, and every once in a while you just put a little weld here, and you can go ding, 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 ding. Don't judge me because I'm not a welder. The idea is that if I weld so many crappy welds, eventually some of them will stick. Anyways, once you're done welding there, you're going to take your hammer and you're going to hammer in this so it stays close up against your panel. Once you get that up there, then you can go to the back side and start doing your tack. Also, I should have ground this a little bit so I could make some stream of welds here, which I'm going to do. Next, I'll grind this off, this edge off, so I can take this and put it to this. Okay, so when you've got them both put together and there's very little gaps, you can start your welding. I also hit it from underneath here as well to get it closer together. It ain't pretty, and this is one of the few situations I'll ever say only God can judge me, because you should always judge yourself. Make sure you're doing the right thing. If it don't feel right, it probably ain't right. Now for this portion of making the floor, I'm not going to get super in-depth and super technical on it. I'm just going to measure it out, and my piece is going to go in there longer than this, and then I'm going to cut it with the die grinder after I have it welded into this area. I usually weld them back into here, so I'll cut me out a piece that's 5 or 6 inches. Generally it'll fit inside this gap between this and between here. Okay, so I've got an angle drawn out. I'm going to cut it out of here, and I'm also going to cut out an edge so I can make a bunch of strips for L brackets. Obviously I don't do any measuring, I just make strips of metal because I'll bend them in half, as you'll see pretty soon. Now I'll go down and cut them off, and I'll have a bunch of L brackets. Okay, with my piece cut, I'll slide it into place. Now it's going to overhang, and I'm going to have to mark it up and make it a little bit better. Then I'll hold it down with the magnet, or you could use a self-tapping screw to hold it to the floor, and then we'll make a mark on it. Now what we'll do is we'll take and make a mark on this outside edge right here with our marker, and then we'll go back to the die grinder and we'll cut that edge off of there. Or you can leave it on there and then cut it off later, but while you can still remove the panel, it is easier to cut instead of trying to cut it on this edge right here. One good thing about using the self-tapping screw is more than likely you'll get it back in the exact same spot, and if you only use one screw, you can move it around. Now, I'm not going to cut right up to the line, because if a little bit hangs over, we can knock it down with a hammer, and it'll add some rigidity to the outside edge of it. Now, before I cut them out, I generally make these little slats. So I'm just cutting little pieces, and it makes it easier to cut around these angles. Well, let's see if my cutting skills are any better than my welding skills. Yeah, it's a pretty nice match. Pretty nice indeed. Now to gusset this thing up and seal up the floor. Okay. So now before I put my panel down, I need to clean all of this area right here where my panel is going to sit. So we're going to grind this down, make it metal to metal. Now with the panel in its place that it's going to be, I'll take my marker and I'll mark the bottom of it. This way I know where I can drill screws behind that part and make holes so I can weld it to the floor with it over the top of it. And I'll also mark the outside of it so I know where it's going to lay in on the floor. Now, taking my 1/8 inch drill bit, I'll drill a couple holes in here so I can plug it down to the floor and it's more sturdy that way. While I'm grinding this area of the floor, I'm going to grind up here too, because I should have ground this down already so I can weld my L brackets into there. Now I leave a little bit hanging off and I do the inside first, because then I can attach my ground right here, and then once I get a couple tacks on the inside, I can pull my self-tapping screw up and use it for my ground post of my electrode for my welder. Now when I've got a couple tacks in there and I know my floor is held down to the existing portion of the floor, I'll take a ball peen hammer and I'll roll this area in so it's contacting the metal underneath it, so when I weld, it welds to the actual floor. Now when we've got this tacked down pretty well, we can pull up our screw and put our ground right there. Now, working from the mill well, we can take and tap up our metal and start tack welding it, and we can hold it with our hammer as we tack weld it. Before you weld it, you're going to want to make sure that you grind some of this off so you have something that it will stick to. Once we have that tacked up in there, we can take our little strips of metal and make them into L's. This process is not 100% necessary if you just welded the whole channel up there, but it's going to add some rigidity to it, so I do it. Now, I bend them over and I ting them down with a hammer because I do want them to be square. I personally like mine to look like this. Now you just lay them in there and start tacking them down. You don't have to worry about these little gaps right here because we'll fill that in with our caulking. Now, we can take and grind this portion down and start to brace the floor right here. Obviously, because this rusted out right here, this needs the most bracing along the bottom of here. I don't necessarily need to brace it right here because it's not that far back, but bracing it right here will allow the floor not to flex as much. So we're going to go ahead and do that. You're going to brace this part first and then this part, and once you get that tack welded to the frame, if your frame is actually there like it is on this one, then you can just hammer this up to your floor so you're able to drive the two together. Okay, so if you're not a very good welder like me, you can always tell when you've welded properly, because we welded from the other side quite a bit, where it heated through on the metal. So that's a good thing. Okay, so now we've got to fill in all of that stuff right there. And we want to connect the two together. So we're going to use some of our L brackets, and we're going to basically use our seam sealer, and we're going to glue them in there. Because we can't get behind there and weld as easy as we could on the other side, so we're just going to add a little bit of rigidity to it with a couple of our L brackets, and then we'll put in spray foam and it'll be all good. Okay, so it's probably a wise idea to clean up as much of that surface rust as you can. We're not going to be able to make this 100% secure without welding in a bunch of straps or replacing the inner fender liner of the actual wheel, but putting these gussets on here will give it some longevity. We're trying to get 3 to 5 years out of these vehicles with this repair. Is it ideal? Absolutely not. Now what I'm going to use to fix this and seal all these seams is a PL 3 times. They make an 8 times, which I use during the screw and glue method, where you glue in these things into here and screw them down. But you can also use rivets. If you want to see that procedure, you can actually see that on my channel under the playlist for rusted out shock towers. So to put these in there, all we do is basically put a little bit of glue on both sides of them. I'm going to be hard to hold the camera and do it at the same time, but you get the idea. then stick them down in there. Okay, now that you've done that, you can grab you some good stuff, spray foam, and start spraying up in there. There's been times in the past where I took duct tape and I put it over the ridge so the spray foam wouldn't drop down all the time. While the spray foam is still milky, I'll take a piece of my extra angle and I'll push it up in the crack. Okay, so I had to cut off the tip. You'd normally cut it off a little bit less than what I did here, so you want it to be a little bit longer and the hole in there is a little bit smaller, so you don't burn through this stuff. But with the air tool, it pushed out really quick, so I had to throw that tube away. Now we're going to start sealing the seams around here, and we'll go down here, we'll go up here. Everywhere you welded in any holes that you have, you're going to seal them up. Okay, so now when you apply all of your sealant, you want to apply it anywhere where two seams come together. And you will want to avoid at any cost, no matter what your heart and your mind tell you, to take your finger and drag it across there. Trust me, it doesn't work. You can, however, take your putty knife and run it across there. Just make sure you clean this stuff off before it gets dry, because it gets really super hard, and that'll help you seal up anywhere and push it down inside there in a somewhat uniform fashion, at least on the outside. Now once I've laid this down, I puddle it with my putty knife and get it into there. We want it to go inside all of the potential holes and seal up really good. And if this is too thick along here, your panel won't fit on correctly. Now she's starting to look really good. We know that we've got it all sealed down and sealed in very well. This part on the horizon isn't so much to worry about because it's got the spray foam there, and when we get done painting this, it's going to be sealed up excellent. So the next step is we're going to go ahead and spray some primer on it. Generally I use like a self-etching primer, and then we're going to put truck bed liner over the top on the inside and the outside, and it should look pretty good. With our light on the inside, we shouldn't be able to see through the panel any of the spots that we fixed, so we want to double check all of that. Looks pretty good from my end. Want to make sure that you get up inside here. I noticed I missed a spot, so I'm going to have to go through with my caulk and caulk up inside here. Okay, so now that we've got it this far, now I'm going to use a little bit of primer on there, primer it out, and then I'll use a little bit of the truck bed liner on the inside and the outside to seal this thing up. I'm not an artist, but I hold my can about 4 to 6 inches away from my work, and I move like I'm a robot. Now, I don't care too much how you folks do it, but I put on a heaping helping of my undercoating. I'll put it on, let it sit for like 10 minutes, and then I'll put another coat on it. Generally, I'll do 3 coats, because especially on the outside here, because these tires are going to throw up stones and stuff, and we want to keep this as airtight as possible for as long as possible. Well, I'd say it turned out great. Remember us down here at Accurate Engines, and the next time you need an engine, we offer free shipping, 100-mile pickup to and from. Remember, don't be the next of them, be the first of you, and if anyone else can do it, you can do it too. If this video was helpful, please put on one of them sweet Clayway playlists at night while you're sleeping and just turn that old volume down. Donate to our GoFundMe so we can help needy families all across the country with vehicles. Consider subscribing, giving us them sweet old thumb up, and sending us some nice comments down below. Look in the description if you want more information about the things that I'm talking about or some of the products that I used in the video. God bless and have the best of days.